Yeah, so it's almost the end of the regular season for baseball. And I mean, when I think of baseball and I think of movies, The Sandlot is clearly top of mind for me.
I mean, how could it not be? It is the greatest baseball movie of all time.
All right, we can have that conversation. I don't know. I mean, Field of Dreams, The Natural,
I don't know.
Major League.
If we're talking most
Bull
quotable,
Durham.
most watchable, has had an impact on so many generation. I think it's the best one ever, dude.
I mean, like I said, Bull Durham, Major League, Field of Dreams, The Natural, they all want to talk to you. But that's The Sandlot.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So that's what makes baseball movies great, is maybe we'll do a show on and have a conversation on the greatest baseball movie of all time at some point.
Maybe we should. And maybe we should roll the intro.
The great Bambino hit a towering 400-foot home run. And even although he'd been a hero before that, that's pretty much how he became a legend. 30 years later, a kid named Benjamin Franklin Rodriguez became a neighborhood legend. It was in the greatest summer of my life when he taught me how to play baseball, and he became my best friend. And he got me out of the biggest pickle I'd ever be in.
Welcome back to Remake or Replay, the show where we decide if a classic movie is a remake or if it's just perfect the way it is. I'm your host, Kyle Autry, joined by my co-host, Chris Clues. Chris, how we doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. I'm so excited about this episode. I'm excited about every episode. But yeah, I'm doing great. I'm excited. Look, we kicked off the NFL season. Always, the excitement. It's like 5 months of me getting excited for NFL. And then within 2 weeks of my fantasy league, I hate the NFL. So weird.
Yeah, and this will come out. It's probably going to be like, little ways into the year. Obviously I'm wearing my Clark Griswold Bears hat right now. So things are a bit dicey at the moment, even though we're at a 1-1 start. But we'll see. But enough football talk. Let's bring in our producer extraordinaire, Zeno. Zeno, how we doing tonight, man? You fired up? Talk some Sandlot?
Yes, I'm down. I'm excited to be here.
I love it. So, and we'll be bringing Zeno back in periodically throughout the show, getting his input. We love getting the input from the younger generation, which he is, and somebody that hasn't watched the movie a million times, like I'm sure Chris and I have. But yeah, the whole reason we're here tonight is to discuss The Sandlot. We're stepping up to the plate with this one. It was released in 1993. It's written and directed by David Mickey Evans, and it stars Tom Gyrie, Mike Vitar, Patrick Renna, and the late James Earl Jones. This coming-of-age sports film has left a lasting mark on moviegoers young and old, earned just over $34 million at the box office on a $7 million budget, becoming a cult classic. Chris, obviously we're talking about a movie that's pretty iconic here. This is our very first podcast since the passing of James Earl Jones. I just want to give you a moment to let's talk about the legacy of him, right at the top of the show. I think that's the most respectful way to approach it instead of waiting toward the end.
Yeah, James Earl Jones. I think what makes him, there's so many things that make him great, but his career spanned over so many decades that everybody has a different memory of what made him great to them. And if we're sticking, to movies, of course, depending on who you're talking to, it could be a voice in Darth Vader. It could be something, before that, because he was doing quite a few films before that. It could be Field of Dreams. It could be I don't know if you know this, but he actually voiced he did the voice of God in a reading of the creation. And I have to tell you, whether you're religious or not, if you were to cast the voice of God, that's a pretty good voice to start with and end
right.
with. So, just an incredible career that spanned, was it 6 or 7 decades? Coming to America. I mean, for me, of course, not a huge role in Coming to America, but anytime he stepped on the scene, anytime he stepped into a scene, he owned it. You couldn't take your eyes off of him. Mustafa, right, from The Lion King. I mean, I could go on and on. Yeah, just and apparently a brilliant human being as well, which is more important than anything else.
And I'm sure we'll talk about this maybe as we go along, if not on a different podcast, but he's arguably in maybe 2 of the top 3 baseball movies of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the man did not love baseball at all. So
that's right.
It's just that good. So
he did not. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
what he did was, I mean, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, no. I mean, I just, if you go back again and just look at all of the movies that he did, and even going all the way back to 1970, there was a movie called The Great White Hope, and it was about Jack Johnson. If you're a big boxing fan, I'm sorry, Jack Jefferson. If you're a big boxing fan, it's a great movie. And if you see him then, man, it's pretty cool. Like, just because most of us, he was older when we got to know him. So to see him in 1970 is pretty cool. So I would definitely recommend going back and watching some of those older movies.
Yeah, I think what he did was really magic. And I think that's the perfect segue into our sponsor of today's show, Rusty's Ice Cream. It's a magical place here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You got to stop by Rusty's Ice Cream. It's a retro 80s shop, totally awesome ice cream, and even cooler decor once you get inside. It's going to take you right back to those childhood memories, and you'll come for the decor and the vibes, but you'll come back for the ice cream because it's amazing. So shout out to Rusty's for being a sponsor of the show. But let's go ahead and dive into our deep discussion part of The Sandlot, Chris. So at its core, The Sandlot is about friendship. It's about childhood innocence and the joy of summer baseball. And it really resonates with multiple generations. And it reminds us of just freedom, adventure, youth. And whether you're a kid of the 60s, like the characters in this one, or you're a kid today, I think everybody can relate to it on some level. Chris, I know you weren't a child in the 60s, but for you, like, what about The Sandlot is most relatable for you?
And thank you for that, because yes, I was not a child of the 60s. I appreciate it. I think what's most relatable to me is how the boys interacted together. Because this was before, even when I grew up in the 80s, before social media, before, we all had phones in our hands. Things didn't change all that much over those decades up until the late 90s in terms of how we communicated with each other and how we interacted with each other. So that was something that really stood out to me, remembering those kids, those guys in my neighborhood. I was talking to somebody about this earlier when I saw the episode, that, your friends were your neighbors. That's all we kind of knew. So later on in life, as they say, we went our separate ways and did our different things. But early on, like they just adventured together. Every day was an adventure. And that's what I related to, because every day really was an adventure with my friends when I was 12, 11, 10.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting line in this film where they're talking about how dedicated Benny is. And there's in the voiceover saying he would have played rain, shine, tidal wave. It didn't matter. To him, baseball was life. But then it comes to a moment where baseball's just not going to happen for him. So they're like, where are we going to go? And they're all like, let's get pool honeys. And it was an adventure though, right? Like so much of this movie is about adventure and about friendship. Like that's all this movie is to me. Is like it's one adventure after another adventure, into some trouble, out of trouble, like, and that to me is like that's childhood. So Zeno, obviously you're the youngest on the panel here. For you, like where does this movie like hook up with you? What do you like about it?
Oh, okay. I also agree with you guys about the childhood adventures, especially like your neighborhood kids were your friends growing up. That was the same thing for me. I think that whole camaraderie with the friendship of your friends, just going outside playing ball together, or even you just doing something together, was one of my favorite things about it.
I was just going to say, we all three are kind of pointing to the same thing, and we're from different time, from a different time, but all pointing to the same thing. And it goes back to one of the quotes that I love, which is, the narrator, who was also the director and the writer of the movie as well. He says, we all lived in the neighborhood for a couple of more years, mostly through junior high school, and every summer was great, but none of them ever came close to that first one. When one guy would move away, we never replaced him on the team with anyone else. We just kept the game going like he was still there. I mean, it does give me chills. I'm being honest. Like, it does, because it takes me back. And that was a long time ago for me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like the minute you started reading that, I can vividly picture every kid in my neighborhood. Like, and eventually, like, yeah, one by one, they kind of like dropped off. Like, they stopped hanging out. They didn't want to come outside anymore. They moved away. Like, whatever the reason is, but like, you never replaced them. Like, somebody might come along, but they're like, they weren't the replacement. They were just like the next kid. Okay?
And it was easy to make
That's
friends.
cool.
I mean, wait till you're over 50 and you try to make a friend. That's fun.
Oh gosh. I can imagine. So one of the big things about this movie is it has a huge impact, because I hear current MLB players constantly talk about how much this movie like really was like their first introduction into baseball. Like, they found Little League Baseball, they found the movie, and then they're like, this is what I want to do forever. And they love the movie. I just recently, which we'll get to in a little bit, went to a minor league baseball game. Squints threw out the first pitch. I did a Q&A session with him. We got autographs with him. It was really cool. But then when the game started, he went to go throw out the first pitch. He's in the dugout. All the players are coming up to him. Not a couple players, all of the players. They all wanted pictures with him. It was like, you would have thought Mickey Mantle was out there. That's how they were reacting. It's wild, the impact and legacy this movie's had. Chris, why do you think that is?
I would say it wasn't just baseball players. I mean, Kobe Bryant apparently would watch the Sandlot on the 4th of July with his family every 4th of July.
Oh, wow.
Whoa,
It's a little fun fact I found. I mean, maybe it could be fact checked. I don't know, but it was pretty sure it was like IMDb or somebody who had it up there, or pretty large. Yeah. So anyway,
Zeno, fact check it right now for us.
I'm looking right now. I got you guys.
All right, cool. Thanks, Zeno. So yes, why do I think it had such a big impact like that? I think because it's relatable for so many of us, and you didn't even have to play baseball to find it relatable, because going back to your point about what it's really about at the core is friendship and community and neighborhood and our youth and growing up and having something in common with everybody, that commonality that we had that created that group of friends that unfortunately we lose a little bit as we get older. As you said, people move away, they go in different directions. This guy becomes part of this group. This guy becomes part of that group. And suddenly, we realize that there was that moment in time. And I think it's so relatable to so many people.
Zeno, any luck?
Yes, from essentially sports.com, they did mention that with Kobe Bryant, he would watch The Sandlot with his family. He in an interview, he shared that the movie became like a holiday tradition for him, for him and his family.
Amazing.
And so he enjoyed it because it was a fun, friendly, family-friendly movie, right? And then it's one of the ways that he will bond with his daughters, and it was just good memories that they created.
I love it.
That's awesome. I love that.
Awesome.
I love to hear it. The Black Mamba.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let's talk about the cast. The cast in this one, bunch of child actors, but a lot of these guys were like veterans of the screen. We've got Scotty Smalls, who's the new kid in town, later becomes like the left fielder for the Sandlot team. You've got Benjamin Franklin Rodriguez, also known as Benny the Jet, who's really the leader of the group. He's the most dedicated. He's the most skilled. You've got Hamilton Ham Porter, who's our overweight, short-tempered catcher. We'll talk about him as we go. We've got Michael Squints Palladores, who's the glasses-wearing, like, snarky shortstop. And we've got Yaya, your smart mouth third baseman. Kenny Keeter de Nunez, who's the pitcher. We've got Bertram Grover Weeks, I feel like I should be spitting after every name, like they do in the movie.
Right.
Timmy, Tommy, Timmons. Yeah. Then you've got Timmy and Tommy, who are brothers. Tommy's the older, Timmy's the younger one. We've got a couple of great cameos, but I don't want to get into those yet. So let's just talk about the kids, Chris. So for me, the most relatable character is Ham, because I was also kind of the chunky, like smart mouth kid who was, pretty good at sports, but like wanted to be like the funny one in the group as well. Like I would definitely be the one that would walk in and be like, "Hey, ladies," and then yell cannonball and dive in. So like, which character do you relate to here?
Oh man, that's a good question. Wow. I mean, boy, that is a real tough one for me, because I do feel like I related to a few, not any one specifically. Kenny, I related to a lot because I mean, I was a pretty good baseball player. I didn't maybe should have taken it more seriously like Benny the Jet.
Sure.
But Kenny also, he ends up in AAA. So the story goes, right? So he's a pretty good pitcher. So I relate to him on the level that he was just, a good baseball player. Gosh, I mean, I'd love to say that I relate to Squints, but he was a lot more daring, I think, than I may have been. Yeah, that's a tough one for me. I would say that I would say it would be a combination of a handful of them, honestly.
All right, Zeno, what about you?
Oh, I will have to say something similar to what Chris said, because I feel a little bit of Scotty, where being a new kid in the neighborhood is really hard to fit in. But then once you get in there, once you're accepted, you're just part of the group. So I feel for him on that aspect from me growing up, but also understand him as well too, because I always try to be the funny guy. Just how I am. I was a bigger dude, of course, but just try to be fun and just be the group's funny morale guy, if that makes sense, right? So I guess those two would be the most relatable for me.
I love it. And one of the things that I think really ties the group together is to me, like they're the perfect age. If the cast would have been like 7 and 8 year olds, I think this is a way different movie. If they're 15 year olds, then you got to have there's got to be more females involved. Like they're at that like age of innocence right here that is like perfect for this movie. And they actually did cast originally younger, and then they changed it, I think during production actually, or right before production, because that was one of the things that Chauncey, who plays Squints, talked about at the Q&A I attended, that they recasted.
You bring up a great point about the age. I mean, I think that maybe another reason that it's so well received is they found the sweet spot, as we would say in baseball, right? They found their sweet spot. The age was perfect because, again, talking to somebody earlier today about this episode, and I said, we made the friends that we made at the younger ages because they lived on our street. Typically, maybe it was because of an organization that our parents belonged to, or a group or something like that. But for the most part, our friends came from the neighborhood that we lived in. And all we had in common was that we lived on the same street, or the street over, or maybe the street over there. And we met in elementary school in first grade or second grade. That's what we had in common. That was it. There was no drama. There was no conflict. We hadn't gotten to the point yet where we were little humans. We were still kids. And when you get to the age of, when you're 9 or 10, they're not old enough to have their own individual stories. When they get to 15 or 16, their individual stories there's too much of a splintering going on. This captured it right before everybody kind of goes their separate way, and it was perfect.
Absolutely. And I want to talk just a little bit more about the cast, and then we'll move on. So, I mentioned that they're very well known, because if you're a kid of the 90s like me, a lot of these guys went on to do other pretty big kids movies. So Mike Vitar, who plays Benny the Jet, lands the Mighty Ducks right after this. He's in Mighty Ducks 2 and 3. Brandon Quinton Adams also is in Mighty Ducks 1 and 2. You'll know him as Cake Eater. He's the one that gives crap to the kids that come over from the Hawks. Chauncey Leopardi would go on to star in The Big Green with Patrick Renna right after this. Then we're talking about a supporting cast that's like awesome. You've got Karen Allen of Indiana Jones fame. You've got Dennis Leary, who is launching a very successful career as a stand-up comedian and would go on to have his own TV show forever. You've got James Earl Jones. You've got Art LaFleur. I mean, it's just there's great supporting cast around the kids that I think when they do pop in, Chris, like they make a big impact on the movie.
And of course, you had multiple English Mastiffs that played the beast.
Yes. We got to talk about the dog, right?
Yeah, I mean, the largest one, by the way, that licked Scotty's face at the end of the movie was one of the largest dogs in the world at the time. He was over 200 pounds. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, over 200 pounds.
So that was not just a clever, like, camera lens. Like, that was a really massive dog.
Massive dog with a huge head. Yeah. So you're right. I mean, that cast, and Art LaFleur and James Earl Jones were both in Field of Dreams.
Yeah.
Art LaFleur playing Babe Ruth, obviously, in the Sandlot, and played I think he played the first baseball player that came out of the cornfield to talk to him, cross the line, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah.
He is in that movie as well. I think we have to talk about some of the famous lines in this movie because, like I mentioned earlier, I think this is probably one of the most quotable movies out there in this time. So, obviously, I think the big line, right, is going to be "You're killing me, Smalls," which he says several times. The first is when he's trying to teach him what a s'more is, and he's like, "What? Can I have some more of something when I haven't had anything?" He's like, "You're killing me, Smalls." He just snaps at him. And then we've got "Forever."
I love that
Forever.
one. I still say that just when I say the word forever, I can almost never say just forever. I have to say forever. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's two that I still say, like, to this day, without doubt. And I'll exclude "You're killing me, Smalls" because that's on like every t-shirt every day that I walk around. Somebody's wearing one. They're everywhere. If you were thinking, you wouldn't have thought that. I love that line. And then this is baseball, not tennis. I love those two lines.
And the kid is
every baseball season, I use those lines. Yeah.
And the kid is an L7 weenie.
And to have to. Yeah. L7 weenie, great. Some lady named Baby Ruth?
Yeah.
Ruthie? Yeah. So quotable.
The King of Colossus? There's so many funny ones, but I mean, there are some ones like, remember, Babe Ruth, Art LaFleur. Remember, kid, there's heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Follow your heart, kid, and you'll never go wrong. I mean, that is like, that sounds like a line out of an Academy Award winning movie, not like, The Sandlot.
Right.
Which should have won Academy Awards, by the way. And then, Squints. I've been coming here every summer of my adult life, and every summer there she is, oiling and lotioning and oiling. I can't take this no more.
His adult life. He's 12 years old.
I know.
What are we talking about?
I know. And then the last one for me is like, because it opened up that entire conversation. He's like, wait a minute, Smalls, you mean to tell me that you went home, swiped the ball that was signed by Babe Ruth, brought it out here, and actually played with it?
And actually played with it? Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, I'm telling you, the quotes are amazing. We could spend an hour on the quotes, but I want to get into some like real fun facts and behind the scenes because there's a couple really cool ones with the Sandlot. The first one is that at the very end of the movie, Benny is playing pro ball for the Dodgers, and obviously it's not Mike Vitar in makeup as a 35-year-old man, but that is his real life brother, Pablo Vitar. Which I thought was really cool that he got to do that. Like, that has to be like a banner moment for the Vitar family. Like, two brothers, older brother, younger brother, in one of the greatest baseball movies of all time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, then I would
Yeah.
have to say, I thought the cast for the adults were like great casting, if that makes sense, for the younger
Yeah.
cast. And I was like, why does the older Benny look so much similar? Now that you said that, I'm like, okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know? I didn't know that, but I'm like, this is some really good casting right here. They have it.
Yep. I've got two more good ones. Apparently, director David Mickey Evans had one instruction for Squints during the pool scene, and that was to keep his tongue in his mouth during the kissing scene,
Yes. Yeah.
which I
I
found
read that
amazing.
as well. It's awesome.
Yeah. And then the last one, I'm a huge card collector. You can find me on YouTube at 10th Inning Cards if you guys are into that. Small plug. But there's a moment in the dream sequence where Benny is talking to the Babe, and he looks over and he goes, I don't know why. Can I have this? And he picks up a Hank Aaron rookie card, who would go on to break the all-time home run record from Babe Ruth.
Wow.
So I love that callback.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting fact that maybe a lot of people don't know when they watch the movies. But yeah, Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs. Hank Aaron hit 755. And then with an asterisk, Barry Bonds passed them both.
Yeah. With
So,
an asterisk.
yeah.
Well,
There you go.
Talking about classic cards, that might be
Yeah.
a perfect segue to one of our sponsors who has classic cars.
Absolutely. And we're talking about the Rad Collection, which is an automotive dealership in Orange County, New York. It specializes in 80s, 90s, and 2000s cars, with 2024 being a significant year in the collector car market, as all cars from 1999 and older are now considered classic. Whether it's your first car, your grandma's car, or the car you took to prom, these cars bring you back to a different time of your life. Check out the Rad Collection on Instagram and see their totally rad cars for sale at the rad collection on Instagram. So shout out to them. Check out the sponsors and show them a little love, guys.
Of course, I'm the 80s guy, so I've got to bring something in that ties it to the 80s.
Do it.
The Vincent Drugstore, which is where Squints, I think, ends up owning it at the end and having 9 kids with peppercorn.
8 or 9 kids, yeah.
When Smalls first goes to the Sandlot, that Vincent Drugstore was also used 5 years earlier in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers in 1988. When Rachel and her friend Jamie go to pick out a costume, it was also used the next year in Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, 1989, in the scene where the man in black steps off a bus and makes his way through town. So I had to tie the 80s back to this somehow.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And I hope to visit there one day. I think it's been kind of redone and there's like any semblance of the drugstore left, but I do want to visit Salt Lake, Utah and tour the Sandlot and do all that. So that's on my list. That's very cool, man. I love that interesting fact. And one thing I also really love is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and that's where Smalls discovers that he has lost a Babe Ruth signed ball, which he doesn't really understand the significance of quite yet. But to me, this is like, it's the heart of the movie's conflict, right? Like all the stuff that happens post the baseball are about getting the baseball back. It's the entire third act of the movie. So what Smalls does is he sets off a chain of events. He snags the ball, then he belts it over the fence, lands in the dog's playpen area. And to me, Chris, it's just a great setup for the kids to try and retrieve the ball.
It's an adventure. And that was, again, what so much of our childhood and youth was about. If you were fortunate enough to grow up with a group of friends at that age, 9, 10, 8, 9, they were 11 or 12 or 13 in the movie, but they probably, many of them knew each other before, except for Scotty. They all kind of hung out together. That was what you did. And you hoped for an adventure like that. You hoped that somebody would do something stupid, and then all of you would have to come together to try to figure out how to solve it. And that's what makes it so great, is that's what it was about. It was about the adventure, I think, as much as anything. And it's what brought them closer and gave them that memory for life, no matter what direction they went.
Zeno, what do you think of the setup? Just losing a super valuable ball. Like I can imagine, like you weren't like probably the biggest baseball fan of all time. Like if your dad had collected baseballs, like you might have done that on accident and taken a ball outside and smashed it over the fence, and you're like, I don't know, Baby Ruth, who is she? Like,
Yeah, I will feel super guilty. I feel like we've all been doing that. We were just like,
yeah,
little dumb kids, just doing things when I never know the repercussions until later on. And like, oh man, I have to get this back home. Oh, and those kind of things are just that comes to my mind about like that moment, especially with the baseball scene, like something that you take from your parents and then that you shouldn't have taken, and then you've been warned, but now you do it anyways, and this is what happens.
And there's also the struggle that he's having with his stepfather, played by Dennis Leary, and that he's really trying to, they're trying to carve out a relationship. They're trying to figure each other out, and they're both having difficulty with it. So this now adds to the difficulty for him. And, that's why he's so freaked out about, I don't even know that it's about the value of the ball in his mind. It's about the relationship that he's trying to forge with his stepdad, and that this could really just, it's already been a challenge for him. If you're a kid that had a stepdad in a young age like that, or a step parent, the challenges that come with it for both the step parent and for the kid. So there's that whole dynamic as well, which would make it, much deeper than we probably want to go today. But
the next thing we're going to talk about here is Squints and Wendy at the pool. So this scene is legendary for its humor, for how bold he is. Essentially what happens is Squints fakes a drowning. Wendy jumps in, pulls him out, and starts performing mouth to mouth. And at one point, the kids are all looking around. They're like, come on, buddy, pull through, buddy, pull through.
Squints! Come on, man! Oh, God, he looks like a dead fish. What?
This magic moment.
Little pervert! Oh, man, he's a deep shit.
We got to talk about the scene, Chris. It's amazing.
yeah, and all their faces when they see him wink, they're like, huh? What? like, oh man. Yeah, I mean, I always like to refer to the 80s, and there were so many, and actually the 90s too, but there's so many quotes from movies that could be put, although they're maybe with older characters, whether they be older teenagers or even in their 20s, but Risky Business, sometimes you just got to say what the, and that was a line in Risky Business when he was kind of just going for it. You've got Life Moves Pretty Fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it. From Ferris Bueller, you've got Matthew McConaughey in Dazed and Confused when he talks about LIVIN, and living. And, there's all of these things, all of these, like these quotes from these movies that I think of. I'm looking for a dare to be great moment, and say anything.
Yeah.
That all go back to Squints there in that moment, that all of those scenes and all of those characters and all those quotes I think about in that moment, because he defined all of them.
I would like to read the narration, and this is right after Squints is walking out of they're all walking out of the pool. So it says, or he reads, Michael Squints Palladors walked a little taller that day, and we had to tip our hats to him. He was lucky she hadn't beat the crap out of him. We wouldn't have blamed her. What he done was sneaky, rotten, and low, and cool. Not another one among us would have ever in a million years, even for $1 million, have the guts to put the move on the lifeguard. He did. He had kissed a woman, and he had kissed her long and good. We got banned from the pool forever that day. But every time we walked by after that, the lifeguard looked down from her tower, right over the Squints, and smiled. I don't know what it is about this movie. We had this in Sandlot. I feel like next movie we should do another one that's narrated too. Like we're back to back killing it with these narration movies.
I
Maybe
know.
they need to do more of that. But yeah, man, I love it. So great scene. Let's go to the 4th of July scene. This 4th of July scene, the fireworks, lighting up the sky at night. The boys are playing baseball. I mean, I can certainly relate to Ham walking out of his house and stuffing a hot dog down his face. Like he's like, "I'll be right there." He's like, packing up a hot dog. This to me is like the purest form of baseball. Like these kids played when there was no light. Like they just played under the stars. And then it's such a great shot, like the cinematography. Like he hits a shot like into the sky, and then it just like fades into the next day.
Far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties, over the fruited plain.
It's the best scene of the film for me.
And they filmed it in 2 hours.
That's wild.
Yeah, 2 hours.
That's wild. I mean, there's some sets that they have spent 2 hours on Ham making his hot dog. Run it again. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it had to do with how many hours the kids could work at a certain time of night. But
oh yeah.
They did it in 2 hours. And with the pool scene, I don't know if you know that, but it was the coldest day of the shoot. It was, and the water was 56 degrees. And if you go back and look at Squints, his teeth are chattering. That was a real thing.
Yes. He mentioned that in the Q&A. I forgot about that. He said it was the water was freezing. And like he was chattering, and like that was a real thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to digress from the fireworks.
No, that's great.
The fireworks is like the classic. I mean, look, it is so there's so much Americana in 90 seconds there. And you know, I told my dad who lives at an independent living up in Maryland, and they have like a movie night, movie theater. And he'll ask me for movies. And I said, you ought to watch The Sandlot because many of the people in the building there grew up during that time. They're going to know the music, the fashion. But I said, the 4th of July scene is going to take you back to what we talked about all throughout the theme of this movie, which is the neighborhood and the community. And I do remember neighbors coming together during the 4th of July, having a cookout. All of us watching the fireworks together. That was a real thing. If you were fortunate enough to have that, you know, in your life as a child, as a kid, now we're all so kind of separated, but to me, it was 90 seconds of pure Americana.
I could say something.
Go, Zeno.
No, you can't.
For that fireworks scene, like 4th of July, was very nostalgic for me too. I actually was able to grow up with something similar to that, where 4th of July, we'll always do a celebration in the neighborhood and everyone will get together. For me, we played football in the dark, but that was a different story for that one. But just seeing that scene just reminded me of my younger days and how nostalgic that was and how much I actually miss it, because as now that I'm in an age where like we're older now, like technology has gotten so advanced, like people just play games or just be friends online now, where a lot of people, if I remember, like on 4th of July, I don't even see those like gatherings as much anymore. Of people getting together, they were getting together, shooting some fireworks in the backyard. I don't see many of that going on anymore now in today's society.
Because you're old, you're so much older now.
Yeah.
You're so much older.
You know,
you're so far removed.
The one thing we haven't talked yet about with this scene, and this will be, we can put a pin in it after this, but the song that is playing in the background is one of the great singers of all time, and we've got Ray Charles singing "America the Beautiful."
Oh yeah,
and this song is just iconic. Nobody
Yeah.
else should ever sing America the Beautiful. They should stop. Like the name of our podcast, should it be a remake or replay? It should just be replayed until the end of time, and everybody else should stop trying to sing that song.
I agree, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, and by the way, just not for nothing, but anybody that wonders if Kyle works in the corporate world, he just said we'll put a pin in it. So that should tell you all that you need to know. Yes.
That is true. We'll put a pin in it, and we'll circle back around after lunch.
Yeah,
How's that
after we
sound?
take a bio break. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I mean that is, you know, it reminded me real quickly of, if I were to say to you, which is the greater 4th of July scene based on what's happening and the music that's happening as well. Is it the Sandlot with America the Beautiful and the fireworks? Or you know where I'm going with this, right? Or is it
Yeah.
Rocky IV with James Brown singing Living in America with Apollo Creed all decked out in red, white, and blue?
Living in
Oh.
America.
I mean, those might be the two greatest 4th of July scenes ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to top those. Okay, one more scene we got to get into, and then we're going to jump into some awards. So at the end of the movie, we meet James Earl Jones's character. And they meet Mr. Myrtle, who's this really mean old man, apparently. And it's really like the perfect resolution because they not only get the ball back, but they also hear these like amazing stories about baseball. They learn about the history. They learn there's a touching moment that I mean, to me, it's just a touching moment that I think really kind of like buttons up this entire film. And without it, I don't know if you know, they maybe the fence crashes on the dog and they pull it off and they're like, okay, the dog's not that mean, and they just get the ball and they go back to playing. But the fact that Mr. Myrtle comes out and he's a former player and he's not calling him the Babe, he's calling him George, and we find out that he was actually a player. It's awesome.
Yeah, and that you know, for somebody who is not too many years away from potentially being the old creepy Mr. Myrtle on the block, or you know, the supposed old creepy Mr. Myrtle,
Get off my lawn.
yelling at the clouds. I do think that it's like the perfect. I know you got the Simpsons guy yelling at the clouds in your head now. I've got the perfect. I think it's the perfect ending. It really is. And James Earl Jones was the perfect person to be that character, and it really does wrap it up with a heart.
You knew Babe Ruth?
George? I sure did. And he knew me. He was almost as great a hitter as I was. I would have broken his record too, but...
You went blind.
Yep. I used to crowd the plate so that strike zone almost disappeared. Pitchers hate that.
We learn a really valuable lesson there about judgment, because going back to this whole theme, how many of us had a house on the street in our neighborhood where an older person lived, and maybe the grass wasn't kept up the way that it should have been. Maybe but we all looked at it and we were scared, or we judged, or we were afraid, or we made up stories about, you know, I mean, what did Chandler and Friends, when he talks about, I'm going to be the old creepy guy, but he talks about there's Mr. Snake Man with all the snakes and he's going to scare me. Like, you know, there is this thing that we do. And again, it goes back to the adventuring, but as we get older, we start to realize like that's likely not what it was at all. In fact, you know, we see that James Earl Jones was this great human being, or that Mr. Myrtle was this great human being, fantastic baseball player who happened to be blind. And, you know, there's reasons why people's yard may look unkempt when they're older, but we make up these stories in our head. So I think there's a great lesson there.
Well, I have to say, this movie makes me really nostalgic. But speaking of nostalgic, we got to talk about our last sponsor of the show today, and that is Ohio Time Machine Rental. So you can go on ohiotimemachinerental.com right now, and you can learn how you can actually rent the DeLorean from Back to the Future for your wedding, your party, your event film production. And it's really the perfect way to elevate your event with a touch of cinematic history. My company this past summer actually used them. We created a whole video series on YouTube called Back to the Fort. It was amazing. The owner was so great to work with. And I can't say enough good things about Scott over at Ohio Time Machine Rental. And he is a massive movie fan. He's got one of the coolest man caves I've ever seen. And he will eventually be on the show. And we'll make him show some of the cool stuff he has. So, yeah. So check out Ohio Time Machine Rental. And you can follow him on all the social media accounts and check out the website to get quotes and all that good stuff. All right. Well, let's get to the awards, man.
Hey, Kyle.
Now,
Kyle.
Yeah.
You know, you reminded me real quickly when you talked about Benny the Jet and his older brother. Do you know, for those of you baseball people out there, that in the last scene at Dodger Stadium, the third base coach was actually Maury Wills, the real Maury Wills?
No way.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. And I
Where the
mean,
heck
one
they
of
get
the greatest
I-
baseball players of all time. Yeah.
I figured they didn't even shoot at Dodger Stadium. Half the time they change the stadiums and they're like, welcome to Yankee Stadium. I'm like, that's Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah. I had to throw that in there because, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
That's cool. I did not know that. It's award time. We're going to start with the John Candy Award. This goes to the funniest character. I'm going to go first. Chris, you go second. This one for me has to go to Ham. Ham gives some of the most iconic lines in the film, but I really love where he's just playing the catcher and he just keeps ragging on these guys and they walk up and he's like, gonna be a short game, got to get home for lunch. That's one. Like, oh, hey, that's your sister out in left field, naked? And he's like, shut up, Ham. He's like, all right, relax. You should go out with me. He's got so many great lines. So for me, it's Hamilton, the Ham Porter. Who do you have, Chris?
And all of that was ad-libbed apparently. So that's pretty impressive as well. My John Candy Award. So, you know, I mean, I'll just go a different direction since you took Ham. And I'll say that it's Squints, and it's most specifically the pool scene that we talked about. And even if he doesn't say a word, that little and the wink that he gives is just, it's perfect. And so I would say, just based on that scene and to have somebody different than Ham, I'd say Squints. Yeah,
Squints is great. He's got other amazing lines in the film too. He's got the forever scene. Hurry up, Benny. If you don't hurry up, my clothes are going to go out of style. Like, he's got some great lines in there.
They're already out of style.
Yeah, they're already out of style. Phoebe Cates Award. So, most memorable scene. Go ahead, Chris. What do you have for the Phoebe Cates?
Well, I mean, I was going to go with the James Earl Jones unveiling of James Earl Jones as Mr. Myrtle in the movie because I think that's just wow. But I'm going to go with the puke scene at the state fair where they all make the mistake that I made when I first started chewing tobacco. I think everybody who chewed tobacco out there probably got sick the first time they did it. I am guilty as well. But you know, we just talked about Stand By Me last week or previously, and there's a puke scene in that one. So I'm going to go with the puke scene at the state fair.
Yeah, there's something about that scene. Oh, go for it. Yeah.
So when I was looking up some fun facts and everything, speaking of that puking scene, the director, David Mickey, he based that scene from a childhood experience that he had. Very similar to the accidental throw up scene after chewing the tobacco at the fair. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I know from the Q&A session with Squint, somebody asked if they actually chewed the tobacco. No, they did not. But it was disgusting. It was black licorice and beef jerky.
Oh,
that's what it was.
God.
Yeah. Brutal. But I love the scene because they're going on this roller coaster, and as it picks up speed, and like they started off and there's like looking at each other, and then it's like the next time they go around, they're like, and the third time they're like, there's puking everywhere. It's so good. Yeah.
What's yours? What's your Phoebe Cates?
It's the lifeguard scene where he kisses Wendy. Yeah. So it's just that's the one for me. Word Up Award. I gotta go.
Well,
I
so
gotta
let's
go
explain
James
the
Earl
Word Up
Jones.
Award. The Word
Yeah,
Up
go
Award,
ahead.
for those of you that haven't seen it, if you're a fan of 80s music, there was a group called Cameo. Their biggest hit was Word Up. And so we call this the Word Up Best Cameo Award for the movie. There you go.
Yeah, I know I'm kind of chopping your legs off with this one, but James Earl Jones, like it just has to be James Earl Jones. Like the movie's not the same without him.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. And so I'll just go in a different direction. And I'll say that, his stepdad and his mom, Dennis Leary and Karen Allen.
sure,
I mean, both of them together.
equally great,
Yeah.
equally great. Then we've got the I Could Have Done That award, which is this is the award that goes to whatever scene that we feel like we could have done that.
Yeah.
And this is a tough one. I feel like I'm going to get some hate on this one if I'm being honest, but I go with Phillips, which is the kid that picks a fight with Ham and tells him, he's like, "Shut up, butthead." It's like, it's easy for you, Benny. You play with a fat kid and some rejects or whatever he calls them. And it just, yeah, I don't know. He's kind of corny. I feel like he's maybe a bit over the top, and I could have done that. So there you go. What do you got?
I'm going to go with, the grown up Benny the Jet. All I have to do is steal home.
Oh, there you go. That's the.
I need a
that's not bad.
mustache. I need a mustache, but other than that, I just need to steal home.
Okay, fair. That's fair. And then the last one here, I'm gonna go with. We have several awards based on the movie. Like, it's not an action movie, so we don't have the action award for this.
We should
one,
have two more awards here, I think.
You think so? Okay,
Yeah.
I've got Jake Ryan. Oh yeah. We've got the Jake. I skipped one. Jake Ryan Award.
Yeah.
So go ahead. What do you have for Jake Ryan?
So the Jake Ryan Award, for those of you, just as a reminder, the movie 16 Candles, Jake Ryan was played by Michael Schofling, huge, iconic character from the 80s movies, went on to act in the movie Vision Quest and a couple others, and then left Hollywood. And so we talk about this as the Jake Ryan Award, kind of like the Where Did They Go Award, somebody who might have been really talented or had a huge impact and just disappeared from Hollywood, or we didn't see them again. It would be easy to say like 2/3 of this cast, because as Zeno said earlier in the movie or early in our episode, they were all very talented. And it's surprising to me that none of them really came out of it to a point where we know their names and they roll off our tongue as somebody who's famous. But I would say, Squints, Chauncey, because he was so good at that character. But Mike Vitar as well, because playing Benny the Jet, the movie was about Scotty Smalls, but on a larger scale is about him. And, he's an EMT now, I think, in LA, but they didn't have a big.
Here's where I'll push back on it's your award. You can give it whoever you want, but you can find Chauncey. Like, you can go to a con
that's
or
true.
to a
That's true.
baseball game and you can find Chauncey.
That's
around.
a good point. Yeah.
Mike has disappeared off the planet. Like,
Yeah.
he's not on social media. He doesn't do any cons. He doesn't do podcasts. He doesn't do reunions. They talked about rebooting a TV show. Not interested in that. It's like he made The Sandlot. He made 2 Mighty Ducks movies that were highly successful. I think he did maybe one other thing, and then he was gone forever.
Yeah.
He's just gone. And that dude had so much freaking talent. And I hope that he's gone by choice and not gone because something bad happened to him in this industry and he was mistreated, because we also hear that a lot with child actors. So I hope it's not that.
Well, he's a firefighter in LA now. So for what it's worth.
I know he's a firefighter, but like, why so distant? Is there a reason, or is it like, does it interfere with work? I don't know the reason. Only he will tell us at some point. But man, if he ever comes out of retirement and like does a con, it's going to be the best year of those dudes' lives, because they're going to make so much money, because everybody's going to want that photo. They're all going to want their autographs finished because they've got 9 out of 10 guys or whatever it is. Yeah, they're gonna kill it on the con circuit when he comes out of retirement. So, all right, and then the last one is the Who's Cutting the Onions Award. There's a couple scenes in here that I think are kind of touching. I don't know that there's any that like make me cry. But the scene for me that I think where you could cut some onions a little bit is the very last scene of the film, and it's where Benny stole home, and then he looks up in the stands. Smalls is now the announcer, and they both give the thumbs up to each other, and he's like, "Yeah." It's like they're still boys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, mine is at the end. When
Yeah.
he's telling everybody, he's talking about where everybody went.
Yeah.
And each time he talks about one of them, they disappear. And that
Bertram got really into the 70s.
the 60s.
Nobody ever
60s.
heard of him again. Or
The
60s. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, because it's set in the late 50s, I think, and then early 60s, but it got into the 60s and disappeared, and I've never heard from him again. But
Yeah.
I think for me that is a cutting onions moment. And I will assure you, both of you, as you get older, that scene will continue to have a bigger and bigger and bigger impact on you.
Right.
And it will be a well-deserved Who's Cutting the Onions award, because you will continue to look at that scene. It will become more and more poignant. I always have trouble with that word. I can spell it, but I can't say it.
Yeah.
But you get my drift. It's like it just becomes a more important scene in your life as you get further away from it.
Yeah. So here's the actual quote. So it was weird that Benny had said that Babe Ruth was like Hercules of baseball, and the Beast's name ended up being Hercules. None of us could ever figure out what that meant, but we were all amazed by it. I kept in touch with those guys over the years, and I found out that Ya's parents had shipped him off to military school. After the Army, he became one of the pioneering developers of bungee jumping. Of course, we all know why. Bertram got really into the 60s, and no one ever saw him again. I love how short it is. Timmy and Tommy became an architect and a contractor. They started out small, designing playground equipment and prefabricated tree houses, but they became multimillionaires when they invented mini malls. Squints grew up and married Wendy Peppercorn. They have 9 kids. They bought Vincent's drugstore, and they still own it to this day. Hamilton Porter became a professional wrestler. You know him as the Great Hambino. DeNunez played AAA ball. He never got to the majors. He owns his own business now and coaches a little league team, and his son plays on it, and it's called the Heaters. Hercules lived to be 199 years old in doggy years, and I was the last one to move away. But when I did, the Sandlot was still there. After Benny pickled the beast, his reputation spread all over town. From then on, he was known as Benny the Jet Rodriguez, and that name stuck with him for the rest of his life. There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cut
Yep.
the onions, dude. I got
Yeah,
a little
man.
emotional reading it. Holy shit. You're right.
And
Cut
each
the
one of
onions.
them, each one of them disappears, which is I think the bigger piece.
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
Very well done. Yeah.
They did that in Sandlot too, right? Very
Stand By Me.
effective storytelling. Or yeah, sorry, they did that in Stand By Me too, and it's effective
Yeah.
the way they do that. We should probably do that more.
Yeah, they should. They should.
Okay. The whole purpose of this show is it all comes down to this at the end, Chris. It's the reason we're here. It's remake or replay time. So we each get about 60 seconds here. State your case. Should this movie get a remake, or should it be replayed until the end of time? You have the floor. Chris, go ahead.
So I was going to try to be a little controversial here and say that you could remake this. But as we got deeper into the episode, my mindset shifted, and I don't think you can remake this. Number one is there's too many characters. Those characters would have to be absolutely perfect. You're not talking about recasting 3 people or 4 people. You're talking about having to recast 15 that all have 12 to 15 all have a major role. All the kids plus James Earl Jones.
Yeah, it's 9 kids.
Plus,
yeah, I mean, you're 13,
4
14,
3 or
15
4
characters.
adults are important to it.
Wendy.
I think for that reason, I don't know how you do it, because those characters, we talk a lot of times about the difficulty of remaking a movie that has iconic characters. And maybe you could argue that Bertram or I don't know, yeah, could potentially be recast. You can't recast Squints. There's no way. You can't recast Benny the Jet. You can't recast Scotty Smalls. Those are like, there are some characters you could, Timothy and Tommy and Timothy or whatever, they, potentially, but yeah. And I don't know, you can't recast the Beast, man. So I'm going to say leave it the way it is. It's perfect. It's set in the late 50s, early 60s. It came out in 1993, and it's still having a major impact on people that were born well after the movie came out in 2024. So,
Okay.
no.
Okay. To know from you, I am also on that side, but with a twist. So I don't, for all the reasons you just stated, you absolutely cannot remake this movie. You can't. This should be replayed until the end of time. But I have a clip we're going to cut to right now with Chauncey Leopardi, and I asked him, Hollywood likes to remake stuff all the time. Should this movie get remade? Let's listen to Chauncey.
So Hollywood loves to remake stuff. Do you feel like this movie would warrant like a show, a remake of it, or would you like to see it left alone for the end of time?
So there was talks like 4 or 5 years ago, I guess 3 or 4 years ago. We actually had meetings about doing a show after Cobra Kai came out, kind of. And it was actually a pretty good, it was going to take place in the 80s, like 20 years later with us.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah. It would have been really cool, actually. And it was done like in a cool way that it probably would have been really funny. I had Wendy and the kids and owned the store, and then Patrick Ham lived above my thing, and he was trying to be a wrestler, but he had a daughter that he was like struggling to take care of, the great Ambino. And then, we were just thinking like the 80s clothes and the hair and everything would have been really fun. And there was like a cool story to it. And then I think Disney bought Fox in the meantime, and it all got kind of like, Fox was, doing that thing, and now that the mouse owns it, it's anybody's guess. I doubt it'll be with us though, but who knows? Maybe they will later on or not. I'm not sure. They kind of do their own thing.
I mean, Cobra Kai's done terrible. Why would they want to do that?
Yeah. Exactly. No, I that's what I was like. If it's gonna be like cool and kind of dark like that, it would be fun,
Heck yeah.
And it was actually a pretty good they had a whole like show Bible for 5 seasons, and it sounded like it could have been really well done and not cheesy. But who knows? Maybe we'll get to make that. We'll make it ourselves or something. It would be cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how about that, Chris? Essentially, as he said himself, giving it the Cobra Kai treatment. How awesome would an entire season of More Sandlot been?
I mean, I think it's a great idea, and we talk about remake or replay. We don't really talk about that Cobra Kai treatment that maybe we should add that as an option in some of these movies that we talk about, because I can see that for sure. Like, why wouldn't we want to dive into where they are today? I'd like to know where Bertram is if we're going to do it. Like, let's find Bertram since he got lost in the 60s. Let's see what he's doing now.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So that's my roundabout answer. Yeah, you can't remake this movie. It's a replay until the end of time. Don't touch it. But you could do the Cobra Kai treatment. Zeno, where do you land on this one, man? Is this one untouchable for you? I know you're a different generation of fan.
Just rewatching it recently, it's a really tough call because I agree with you guys in some aspects of it. I'm gonna be on the latter and say it could be remade or even like a continuation, because of the fact that if done right, like how Ghostbusters were with the new Ghostbusters series, or even the new Twister movie, for example. If done right and directed correctly, you can make it nostalgic and just add more modern things with it, I guess. That's what they say. And I feel like in that way, it could be remade in that way. But
I kind of agree with some of that. Twisters was awesome. I love Ghostbusters. I just think, go back to what Chris said, I just think there's too many characters.
Oh, but
it's
I get
so
what you're saying.
hard. Yeah. But we want to hear from you guys. We love this part of the show. Make sure you comment on the episode and tell us, would you remake The Sandlot, or is it just a rewatch classic? Tell us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Remake or Replay. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a video. Also want to shout out our sponsors one more time: Rusty's Ice Cream, the Rad Collection, and Ohio Time Machine Rental. Appreciate their support. Being a small podcast, just getting our feet on the ground, to have 3 amazing sponsors right away is awesome. And we thank them. But yeah, make sure you guys follow us on social media. Everything is at Remake or Replay. You can find it very easily on all the social media channels. But if you need help, just check the description notes. It'll all be linked up right there. Next episode, Donna, 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 Donna. We're getting into some Jaws action. One of the biggest and best ultimate summer blockbusters of all time. Is it a remake or is it a replay classic? You got to join us to find out. And that's it. Let's end with the last scene of the movie like we always do. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Stay rad, everybody.
I don't believe it! The kid's still home! The kid's still home!
Okay, I have a fun fact. You guys want to hear?
There you go.
So, the filming location, the movie was filmed in Utah, and the Sandlot itself was built specifically for this movie, right? So, I looked up to see if the Sandlot is still there, and to my surprise, the location is still there. Even though it doesn't look exactly the same as before, it's still being preserved by many of the fans that preserve it as best they can, right? And it's still a good, popular tourist attraction for a lot of people that seen the Sandlot and wanted to go visit the location itself. So if they do remake a movie of it, they can technically use the location again. I think that would be kind of cool to use it.
I think it'd be cool for the Little League World Series to do one game there. Just an exhibition game. It doesn't have to be one that counts for the Little League World Series, but before the Little League World Series kicks off, they'd send 2 teams to play at the Sandlot.
That would be fun. Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah. I love this. And this is the type of stuff that only our true diehard fans are getting it. They're not getting this extra content except for right now. You got to stick around to the end.
Yeah.
To get this stuff, to get these gems, or as Squints might say, Smalls is thinking about hopping the fence. He's like, if you're thinking, you wouldn't have thought that. Maybe you shouldn't have cut it off early. You're thinking, you wouldn't have thought that. You would have stuck around, you would have got this extra material. Well, why are you still here?
Stick around with us until Ferris tells you to go home. Yeah. You're still here?
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Have a good week.
Later.